Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode 4 of Might Help, Can't Hurt, Conversations with Leaders, Doers, and Friends. And this is the bit where I stall, Faye. So we got to wait for eyeballs. Not literally eyeballs, but people watch.
That sounds okay to me. I'm a theater nurse after all.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. Now, is a theater nurse somebody walks in and does that? Or what a theater nurse? No, operating.
Gowns and
Gowns and well, you can wear gowns on stage. I mean,
this is true.
So my guest today is Fiona Jacob, who has sort of many claims to fame in my world, but the one that prompted me asking her to join me in this conversation today, Fee, is the time that you spent as both a theater nurse and running a hospital in the midst of the MERS crisis in Saudi Arabia. And I wondered, like, do you feel like they're following you around, or how is this similar? How is this different? What did you learn? I mean, it fascinates me. I was reading up a little because I do prep a little for these, even though they seem very impromptu. But I didn't realize MERS was actually another strain of coronavirus. Right.
Yeah. So we'll probably pedal back a little in time, I guess, back to 2015. So at that time, I was a director of nursing in a very large hospital in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. And it was holiday time. So if you kind of think of Christmas, New Year time, or around Thanksgiving, it was that kind of time of year where lots of people were away and the hospital was relatively quiet. Yeah. And I was the director on call. So I really got a call 3 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly it was, you got to get in here. We're in trouble.
Right.
And I remember just getting there and the fear and the panic in the team when I kind of just walked in through the door. And suddenly I was being lunged into something which was completely unknown. It's like, I think, if you were back in Wuhan in December 2019, when you're faced with something and you have not got a clue what you were dealing with.
Yeah.
So it became really clear we were not dealing with cardiac patients dying of cardiac disease. We were dealing with something that was bigger than that. I mean, what was extraordinary and ensued was I panicked too. So, hey, I'm going to put my hands up. I gotta say, when I looked at those 10 pairs of eyes looking at me for the answers, I went, and it looked like it was a war zone right behind them, with, as you would see on ER and TV shows, with drapes and machines and blood.
You mean it's not always like that?
No, just in this occasion. Yeah. But you know what was gorgeous, Michael? It was fascinating to me. I stared down at the unknown. It was like looking down the barrel of a gun in one sense. It looked like a war zone in that way. And the unknown stared back at me. And for me, there was nothing coming back.
Big red eyes, because I visualize big red eyes.
It's kind of like a standoff. But what emerged was really both simple and just a gentle nudge. Here's what to do. And here's what to do next, and here's what to do next. And what I learned, which was just one of the most gorgeous things I've ever learned in my life, is to just be able to rely on showing up in the moment. And we get nudges, we get this responsive intelligence, we get almost directed what to do next. And I mean, this went on for 9 weeks, so there was a lot of nudging, I can tell you.
Right. I remember talking to you a couple times in the middle of it, and not quite, I couldn't hold it in my head what you were dealing with.
Yeah. And I guess when you're looking at so MERS is that first cousin of corona. What we didn't know, probably thankfully at the beginning, was we were dealing with something that had a 42% death rate.
So just to contextualize, people are guessing with corona anywhere from like 0.1 to 4.
Yeah.
And MERS was 40.
It was 42 at the time. If you look at the statistics, I think now, because there have been some similar outbreaks subsequent to ours, it's about 34, 36.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, trivial. Sorry, I don't mean that it is, but I mean,
so for 9 weeks, I mean, were you living on adrenaline, or did you? How did you? Like, I mean, I've seen you drink coffee, so I know what you're capable of.
Yeah, me and black coffee, we're best friends. I would say yes at times, but there was something deeper than that, Michael, in my world.
Yeah.
Which was me and the unknown. When we had that kind of conversation and it was starting to get that intelligence, I just felt really, really calm most of the time. And I'm not going to say all the time. I mean, that would be lying, right?
Yeah.
But there was something very peaceful, very graceful, very just being moved by life, which just allowed me to follow the dance and the nudges as we were going through our days. And it allowed me to know what to do next. It allowed me to think, what is actually going to keep the patient safe? What is going to keep the nurses and doctors safe?
Now, how were your team all experiencing that same kind of almost grace, or were they freaking out and you were kind of going, it's all right, children, it's all right? That's how I visualize it.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But I do think that there was something very powerful in, I don't know if you want to call it the presence of calm, because for me, showing up that way and being willing to be with human beings as they were experiencing their terror and their fear and their anxiety, and it just seemed to, from time to time, just dissolve.
Yeah.
They would fall back into that quiet. I mean, there were just some times that the people would say, hey, thanks for listening, I'm okay. And they would put on their PPE and they would go do. And it was fabulous. I mean, there were a couple of gorgeous stories in there. One of the girls I spoke to a little bit later said, I'm a human cockroach, she said. You put me in any situation now, nuclear bomb, I don't care, I'm going to survive. And I loved...
I've never actually heard I'm a human cockroach as a compliment before. But
I know. But what was fabulous was just that sense of, but it was resilience. It was present. It was resilience and presence. It wasn't made up. It wasn't positive thinking. It wasn't gung ho, we'll get through it. Even though there was probably a little bit of grit in there just to keep people going through 9 weeks. It's not a short period of time, right? Yeah. But the experience of ease and grace, the experience of really showing up, the experience of rising to the occasion was just such a part of it. It was gorgeous. And I mean, that's a very weird to say, but weird thing to say.
No, out of context, I get, the word that probably, Michael Neal's talking to somebody who ran a team in a hospital during the MERS crisis. Her description, like in the crawl at the bottom, gorgeous. But in hearing it, I get that sense that there's that sense of flow is really what it is, that we are used to experiencing in certain areas, but don't think of ourselves experiencing in times of crisis.
I think my experience, Michael, has been more that I've experienced this in times of crisis rather than in some normal stuff of day-to-day life, actually. Yeah.
Now, I've always thought that it's because there are just certain situations where you don't have time to think and you know it. And so consequently, it makes it oddly easier to put it all down. Like the expression that I've used for years is about what I do is on the spot and in the spotlight. It's my happy place because I don't have time to think. And I've got years of thinking, right? And that doesn't go so well. That almost wound up with me dead. So to be able to be in situations, firstly, where you discover that capacity, but then, and you and I have talked about this, but I'd love to talk about it a little now if you have thoughts, to be able to transfer it so that you don't have to be in times of crisis to put down your thinking, to experience that moment to moment guidance, that grace, that gorgeousness that you're describing. Like how does it map over?
I think it maps over for me when I wake up to it. There are some times I go through life a little more asleep than I would like to, and there are times when I just wake up to it. And I'll give you an example, trivial example. On Thursday, I was having a bit of a day. It was a bit of a day. There's a lot of things in my life right now. It's full on. And I had a good old-fashioned cry and a bit of a grumble. Yeah. And what was just beautiful about all of that, which people are going to go, really, is I knew that I was making it up. I knew I was okay.
Yeah.
I knew that beneath just the machine whirring of my thoughts in that moment and what it was throwing out as being problems and challenges in my world was just, there was nothing there. It was fluff, it was air, it was cloud, it was nothing.
Yeah.
And it was so easy to be with it. And I even said to my husband, I said, well, I'm just going to wallow for another few minutes because I'm kind of good here, you know?
One of the funniest arguments I remember Nina and I ever having was I don't remember what the upset was, but I could tell that it was just, we were in a mood and nothing good was going to come of it. And I said, look, let's talk about this later. And she said, no, later, I'm not going to be this mad at you. I want to talk about it now. And I was like, actually, sure. That kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. But it does show up for me that way. It's so easy to recognize when you've been to that place, when you've been to that quiet, when you've been to that calm, when you've touched peace. You know, you don't want to stray too far from it. And of course we can, but you kind of know that there's somehow an invisible string pulling you back there. And you can always find your way.
I mean, in a funny way, what I'm hearing you talk about is that finding calm in the midst of chaos is the easy bit. It's finding calm in the midst of calm. In some ways, it's harder.
Oh, I love that. That's gorgeous. Yeah. Hashtag. I like it.
I still am going with the crawl that says, you know, noted Saudi Arabian nurse says, you know, MERS was gorgeous. So how are you finding, is this, I mean, I know you're not in running a hospital now, but how are you finding this? The corona part of this, in other words, what's going on at the moment in the world? Is it sort of like a nightmare from the past? Does it feel very different from where you are now?
I think it's completely different for me. I was thinking back to the movie The Secret Life of Pets. Completely out of context.
Obvious.
Yeah, obviously did. But
when I say coronavirus, you say Secret Life of Pets. Coronavirus. Sorry, everyone. Sorry. Early. Anyways.
I was thinking of The Secret Life of Healthcare Workers, actually, and I'm just curious if there are any healthcare workers, because it's almost like the secret. You get on, you do stuff, you see things that you wouldn't wish anybody to see.
Yeah.
And as you well know, Michael, I've seen not only bomb victims and explosions and all of that stuff also in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's been part of my major disaster life that tags after me. But yeah, it's because I'm not in it and I'm looking at it from the outside. There's a lot I miss about being in it and helping out and being part of a team that would make a difference, make an impact. And of course I have, and so it is a different place. And my mom and dad are now in the category that we have to worry about. You know, they're in their late 80s, and mom has a chronic disease. So it touches my heart that they're kind of alone. And I mean, they have each other, which is fabulous, but they're alone and that they're living through this in Ireland, and I can't get to see them, I mean, apart from having conversations with them every few days. So it's a very different piece for me, but inside I have found, I suppose, that stepping out into the world, which is very different from me. I love to hide behind the healthcare bubble. I love to be a leader, you know, of 3,000 people. But
you wear a mask a lot of the time.
I do. I used to kind of wear a burqa from time to time. Anyway, you know, when you're a leader of 3,000 people from time to time, you are a leader, but sometimes you're kind of more on the servant leader piece. But now this has kind of required me to step into the world from a completely different place, which is how do I help healthcare teams right now? How can I use my experience to help people on the front line, managers of people on the front line? How can I help people really get into touch with we are okay no matter what, that there is this beautiful part of being human, but also this part of the spiritual energy that we are, which is untouchable by anything that's happening in the outside world. So how about communicating that more into the world right now? Yeah. And so I find myself in a completely different place, a little sad that I'm not fully in there and playing in a way, but seeing that there's another way to contribute and be of use.
Yeah. And are you not in there because they won't let you, or are you not in there because it's not, that time has passed?
Well, I'm in Sweden.
I know you're in a new country and I don't know how the...
Yeah. I'm not registered as a nurse here, and to do all of that gets a little bit complicated. And it was also kind of interesting to see myself wanting to wait this one out. Yeah.
Well, I was fascinated. I was hanging out with two frontline first responders who neither of them are anymore. In others, they're both retired, and both of them said we were all together. They said, you know what, I feel bad about it, but we're kind of glad to not be on the front line this time. And I get that. And I mean, you know, for those people who are on the front lines, hopefully more of them are having the kind of experience that you had than the kind of experience I think we all make up that they're all having. Because I think that's the thing is when I see the clips on the news, and of course they're going to show the most dramatic clips. It's the news. That's what they do. But you just see shots of people who are devastated, you know, and the story I make up is, well, yeah, if you just see this panic and death and chaos around you all the time, that must have a cumulative effect. And yet I'm looking at you and I know, but I know you as well. And that's not what you're describing at all. And I just find it fascinating that there's another way of being, even with something like this, even on the front lines.
I mean, Michael, you and I both know that we can have any experience of any situation. And, you know, to go back to those days in 2015, I mean, there were days when I was angry, frustrated. It was holidays, as I explained at the very beginning. And of course, we were trying to get PPE and everywhere was closed. So there were moments and times where, as much and all as I was calm on the inside, above that, there was a little bit of frustration and a little bit of fear, thinking, how am I going to protect my healthcare workers there? I am responsible for them in one sense.
Yeah, but only 3,000 of them, Fee. I don't know what the big deal is.
But I also know that just when we wake up to ourselves, it's so easy just to fall back into, I know what to do next. And it's just coming from a completely different place. And suddenly the experiencing you're having is different. And I guess I just know that that's possible. And, you know, in the coaching that I'm doing now with some of the frontliners, it's really beautiful to be in that kind of conversation. Yeah. Just to wake them up to their fearful thinking. And the other thing about fearful thinking, Michael, is it just doesn't keep people safe. I mean, we think it does. We think that if I worry enough or if I'm afraid enough, that's going to protect me. But in a situation like this, for me, what I noticed is the scared people, the people who are afraid, are nurses and doctors. They went in to take care of a patient. They were the ones that were contaminating themselves or touching something that they shouldn't have. And it actually was the part, it did not keep them safe. And I love being able to share that with healthcare workers, because if they see that for themselves, they really see the truth of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the best of both worlds instead of the worst of both worlds. So instead of, hey, if you want to stay safe, you've got to be freaked out you know, and barely holding it together, as opposed to, hey, if you really want to be safe, you actually need to kind of get to a nicer place, and you need to find that calm and that. I mean, I've always found it. You know, there's a I mean, I think it's called foxhole humor, but you know, from the wars, but there is a kind of a humor that I have always found in first responders, in people on the front lines of anything, that's just. I think some people think, oh, they're just masking their pain, and maybe sometimes it is, but actually sometimes it's just that incredible lightness that happens when we're really, really present.
Right. And I loved. Well, there are two things about that, Michael. One is that lightheartedness just breaks, it ripples through the seriousness. It just, and it becomes infectious, and that not violent.
Oh, your words today is beautiful. Hashtag gorgeous. No, it's okay. Stop.
But it's in that sense.
Whatever happened to Fiona Jacob? She went on Michael Neal's thing and it was over. It was just
she fell out of the sky. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got the people crying chicken lick, and you know the sky is falling. And humor and lightheartedness is just cuts through that, and it's just fabulous. But the other thing, Michael, I mean, I don't know how this is playing out for people, but people fell in love with each other in this time. Not in a sense, we were there protecting each other. We were a team more than we've ever been a team, and probably since then, since we've ever been a team. It was the most gorgeous. We could rely, we could trust. We had this love and just a spirit of caring for one another, because we were kind of the only people we had. You know, we were them, they were us. That's what we had. And the other piece about the lightheartedness was the miracles that happened. I mean, just patients who we thought, and I mean, I would go home at 10 o'clock at night sometimes, and in my heart of hearts, wonder, is this particular patient, and there are a couple that are still in my heart and my brain, I think about, is this patient going to be alive in the morning? And I would know their family, and they, you know, even though I might not have known them as a patient out in the world or a person out in the world, I kind of knew who they were. And there were miracles, Michael. I mean, there were patients that walked out of the ICU after 3 months.
Wow. And
I don't know if I really had believed in miracles before then. I mean, kind of hoped to, wanted to, but in a way, there's something beyond this. There's something our thinking could not wrap our heads around, how these patients could be alive, how they could be walking out. One particular young lady was pregnant. She was one of our nurses, and she had been on every single machine, every beeping machine that you can think of, and for a period of 3 months. And she went on to deliver a healthy baby girl. And I just think to myself, it wasn't even the medicine. I mean, yes, that was part of it, but it was the love and the care and the willing, the willing patients to live. I don't know. I mean, it probably doesn't make sense, but somehow.
I can feel it as you describe it. I'm going to take a slight right turn because this just occurred to me, and I don't even know if you have a thought about it, but what's your take on I guess it's called survivor's guilt? And the way I see it here play out in my world is there are a number of people who are kind of enjoying this time, and it's always in hushed whispers that they admit it. Like it's like, are you having a kind of nice time being a little less busy and a little more and I'm sure that must have been at all levels in the hospital, where the people who were okay and could go home at the end of the night. I mean, was that something that was prevalent, or is that something that in your mind is kind of overblown?
It's a great question, Michael. I think I might have seen that more in the healthcare workers that survived, actually, as opposed to the patients, particularly because they were Arabic speaking and my Arabic is not the best on the planet. Because I did a little bit of research, believe it or not, after this particular outbreak. And I sat with probably 17 of the nursing and medical staff, some who had lived through MERS themselves and had been in ICU, and some who were the doctors who had cared for the patients. So there was a little bit of a mix in there. And I think there was something very moving in the conversations I had with the survivors. Now, some had put it down to God. One of them was particularly religious, and he watched himself going in and out of intensive care for probably about 2.5 months, going on to ECMO machines and being intubated and extubated. So he had this whole movie almost of his experience. And he shared that he kind of always knew he was going to be okay. But it was in the sense of not about living or dying, which is going to sound a little bit strange, I guess. But it's like that whatever happened for him, he was at peace with it. And I loved that, lying in an ICU bed with, as it is, all the crazy machines and people running around and the emergencies that happen and the pain that he was in a lot of pain at sometimes, and having some operations to deal with clots in his legs and clots in his brains and all of that sort of stuff. But just being there, being at peace, being okay with what was going on, and just whatever that is, whatever that was in his heart and his soul and his beingness, it was just this gorgeous way of being okay with life, being okay with death, being okay with being. So it's not really answering your question, Michael, in terms of the guilt or not, but there was a thankfulness and a gratefulness to be alive. That shone through. And well, people had.
I mean, sorry, but it just, that strikes me that you've just said it, is that guilt and gratitude in this sense are just two reactions to the same facts.
Right.
And one of them probably not, I mean, obviously it feels better, but I think it also probably just sets you up better.
Yeah. Yeah, gratitude is such a, well, you know, I think of gratitude sometimes and it hits me. It's like we have to sit down and do gratitude.
Yeah.
But this was,
I read.
This was oozingness of gratitude. It was as if it's coming out through our aliveness and our pores. It was a different sense of what gratitude is.
I don't know if this phrase will resonate, but I experience two different kinds of gratitude, and one is kind of fear-based, because it's like, thank God I didn't. And then there's a kind of a fearless gratitude, which is the one that I hear you describing, where it's not about fear at all. It's almost awe.
Oh, yes. I love that. That was exactly, I didn't have the word for it, but that's perfect. It's in awe of all we are, all we have, even though it kind of doesn't matter in the physical sense. It kind of shows up in a being sense, in an aliveness sense, in an awake to life sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Well, let's finish on a winner then.
Yeah, why not?
So if you want to, if people want to find you, LinkedIn, I think you said, is the best way.
Yeah. Just I'm on LinkedIn, Fiona Jacob. You can find me there, or you can ping me and say hi. Love to hear from you.
Yeah. And Fee, thank you for taking some time out today. That was amazing. That was beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for watching. There will be more Might Help, Can't Hurt coming up. And I appreciate you guys being here. All right. Thank you.